When I picked Danny up the next morning, Sharon looked worried. John, are you okay? And I didn't feel like talking about it, so I just told her it wasn't easy. When she tried to press me on it, I reminded her that she had talked about not wanting to be in the middle of things. She reluctantly let me go. After lunch, I left Danny with the babysitter and reluctantly headed to the session. When I got there, I saw that Jenny had already arrived. As I entered Brian's office, I heard their friendly conversation. They got up to greet me, but Jenny slumped down on the couch when she saw the look on my face. Brian looked at me sadly. John, is something wrong? I tried to be honest. No, I'm just having a rough day. I think it's best for us to just get started. The session was a disaster. Brian knew what was wrong but didn't want to insist. Jenny didn't know, but she was uncomfortable with my obvious attitude. I was miserable because I wanted to stand up and scream, but I knew that would only make it worse. Something else was bothering me, but I couldn't deal with it right now, so I pushed it to the back of my mind. At the end of the session, Jenny left. I said goodbye to her, but stayed to apologize to Brian for being in such a bad mood. He didn't give me a chance. You watched the tape? All I could manage to mumble was a yes. Was it as bad as you feared? Brian, it was even worse. I don't know what to do. I tried to keep quiet so I wouldn't say anything I'd regret later, but I just wanted to tell her how angry I was and how much she hurt me. I can't believe she acted the way she did. The way she acted. Brian studied me for a moment. I was hoping you'd leave it at that, but I can see why the urge to find out what happened was irresistible. Was David telling the truth? I sighed. The worst part is that he was. She was drunk, her best friend tricked her, and she was seduced by 3 people working together. But she gave in and enjoyed herself. A lot. I wanted to resent the way they used her. I really did. She refused several times and said she didn't want to allow anything that would hurt me. As soon as she gave in, everything changed. I decided I couldn't take it anymore and broke the tape. John, the only thing I can advise is that you need to sit down with her and tell her about it. She will be humiliated that such a tape exists and offended that you watched it. You need to be gentle with her because she is very fragile right now. If it takes you a week to make sure you can talk to her without anger, give her that time. You will need to talk about this on your own because I don't want her to be in a position where she feels like she's being ambushed. Once you've talked it over, I'll help in any way I can. Please call me if you need to talk again. I walked away thinking that things were finally as bad as they were supposed to be. On Saturday, I decided it was finally time to talk to her. I was still afraid I might explode, but at least I had calmed down enough to try. I couldn't sleep at night with these images in my head, so I wanted to get it over with. Leaving Danielle with Steve and Sharon, I went to pick up Jenny. I called her earlier and told her I needed to talk to her about something serious. I didn't want to ambush her, but I didn't want to scare her either. I asked if she wanted to go to the park where we often took Danielle. It wasn't usually that crowded, so we could have some privacy. I thought about telling her from the beginning about David and the tape, but decided that was too much. It might upset her so much that we wouldn't be able to talk at all. Given the mood I was in, I knew that there was a very real possibility that things could turn out badly, so I swore to myself that I would stay calm. I wanted to handle things as best as I could. I couldn't afford to be selfish no matter how angry I was. In the 2 weeks since I'd let her start seeing Jenny again, Danielle had visibly improved. Jenny, I think I'm ready to hear your side of the story if you still want to tell me. I know you've been living with this for 7 months now, and it must be hard for you. I can't promise I won't be upset, but I'll do my best to make sure you explain everything. I'm just asking you to be brutally honest. Don't procrastinate. The worst thing right now would be finding out that you lied to me about something, okay? She nodded and took a pause to gather her thoughts. Sighing, she began. Things haven't been going well for us the last 2 months before the trip. I know you've been trying, and I've been trying too, but I've been really worried. I was spending more time with Megan, and she was saying things that just made things worse. I didn't notice it at the time, but I think she was purposely trying to upset me. She never said anything directly against you, but it was enough to feed my insecurities. She told me that she had friends with the same problems as us who ended up divorced. I told her we wouldn't have that ending, but I think some part of me was afraid. I swear I tried my best to make the relationship work, but it was hard. I was afraid it couldn't get any better, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. I think I became defensive because every time I tried to do something, I felt like it wasn't working. I missed being close to you so much that I let some of her stories hurt me. She took a deep breath before continuing. Shortly before we left for New Orleans, she kept telling me how good it would be for our marriage if we were separated for a few days. She said I should have fun so I could relax and let things work out naturally when I got home. Thursday night, we went to the hotel bar and danced for a few hours. After Angie, the bride, and I did a few things on Friday afternoon, we went to another bar. That's where we met two guys. She stopped talking and started to cry quietly. I took her hand and asked her to continue. We danced all together for about an hour, and then Megan and I went to the bathroom. She was telling me how much she wanted the guys and begged me to help her bring them to our room. She said it would be good for my ego to flirt with another man, especially knowing that I wasn't going to do anything wrong. Since they will be the ones sleeping with Megan, I won't have to feel guilty. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I was so stupid. I'm so sorry. I was a little drunk and I didn't think about what could happen. I didn't think about how you would feel about me flirting, even if it was just to help her. She looked down at her hands, rubbing them furiously in her lap. We stayed at the club for at least another hour. Megan asked if they wanted a nightcap and they said yes. I thought I was doing something interesting for her and planned to leave before things got out of hand. I think I underestimated how drunk I was already. Things I knew I shouldn't have done didn't seem so important. I just kept thinking about the fact that she could have a wild night and that I was looking forward to coming home to see you at your best. When we got back to the room, they kept serving me drinks and dancing with us. Megan came up with a silly game for us to play. I can't believe I agreed to it, but I did. Things got out of control right after that, and I cheated on you. She looked up at me again. I would give anything to take it all back. I love you, and I never thought I was capable of such a thing. I thought I was safe, that Megan was making sure nothing happened. I never imagined that I would let myself do something like this. She stopped her story and started crying even harder. I let her talk and then asked her to continue. I wanted to see what matched David's version and what I had seen on the tape. I was shocked that she admitted to everything without blaming anyone but herself. I didn't know if she was trying to take full responsibility or if she genuinely didn't realize her friend had set her up. She kept the sordid details to herself and I didn't bother asking. She admitted to doing it with David, Jake, and Megan. When she was done, I gave her time to gather her thoughts. It was incredibly difficult to admit these things, and I felt awkward trying to ask questions. However, there was one important question that needed to be addressed. Jenny, if what you're telling me is true, why didn't you come home on Saturday? She looked at me with a very real pain in her eyes. There were several reasons, but none of them you're going to like. I know I won't like it. I understood her discomfort, but I needed to know everything, so I asked her to continue. First of all, I felt terribly guilty about what I had done. I didn't know how to present myself to you, so I figured a couple extra days would give me time to prepare myself for how angry you would be. Secondly, I wasn't physically ready for this. If I'd gone home, you would have known right away that something was wrong. She looked away, and I thought I saw a flash of anger. Third, Megan convinced me that Friday was my fault and that it was proof that our marriage was in danger. Wiping away another tear, she refused to look at me. She said I started it all by grabbing her hand and running it under her skirt. Then, she said, I grabbed one of the guys and started kissing him. That's when things got out of control. She paused and finally looked me in the eye. I thought she was my friend and wouldn't lie to me. When I told her what I thought happened, she said it must have been the alcohol and the blindfold that made everything seem more tense. She said they were doing the same thing to me that they were doing to her and everything was fine until I got out of control. I felt my jaws clench with anger as I listened to Megan's further manipulations. While it was hard to separate all of this from Jenny's actions, it was obvious that she had no idea that Megan could treat her like this. Her friend was using Jenny's trust to undermine our marriage. I hoped that in time, I could find a way to repay her for that. Yeah, she told me she got carried away because of what I did. I shouldn't have believed her, but I felt like such a slut. It was easy to think that the way I remembered everything was just me trying to rationalize my behavior. I would have stayed at the hotel all day to try to figure things out, but she begged me to go with her. She said everyone would realize something was going on if I disappeared. She told me that the best way to not make anyone suspicious was to act like nothing had happened. I was so stupid. I began to feel like I was losing objectivity. Jenny's pain was so acute that it was becoming unbearable. I couldn't think of a way to comfort her without making the situation even more awkward, so I hoped she would take my lack of accusations as support. Saturday night, a whole other problem arose. I just don't remember how it started. When we got there, no one told me what was going to happen. I had a couple drinks with Megan while Angie opened her presents and the girls were laughing and joking around. When a man came out and announced the entertainment, I tried to leave, but I felt really weird. I sat there for a while trying to gather my thoughts, but I couldn't. Some girls were dancing on the stage away from the strippers, and I remember Angie pulling me along. The next thing I remember was some woman grabbing me from behind and I told her to stop. I don't know what happened next, but I suddenly realized I was lying on the stage and Megan was, well, you saw. When the stripper came up to me, I know I tried to say no, but it was all like a blur. I guess I just gave up. I was still nauseous from the night before, so I only had a couple drinks, or at least I thought I only had a couple. I can't explain it, but it's true. And if she was telling the truth about not drinking that much, I was willing to bet Megan had something to do with it. I didn't like her story about not knowing what had happened, but she didn't have any reason to lie that I could think of, so I accepted it. I already knew most of what had happened anyway. I asked her if she remembered what happened right afterward because she disappeared from the video. She looked very uncomfortable and said she wasn't sure. It was the first time I sensed any evasiveness from her. I insisted that she tell me what she knew. She turned away from me. Remember what you said to me the night you made me leave? You said I wasn't thinking about Danielle when I acted like a slut with Megan. I flinched when I heard those words. They sounded harsh and rude, even though I knew what I had actually said was even worse. Yeah, I remember that. Well, you were wrong. Everything was like a blur. It was like a dream, and I was totally confused. I knew what I was doing, but somehow it didn't seem real. Then I remembered the conversation I had with Danielle the week before the trip. It snapped me out of it, and I recoiled sharply. I remember Megan calling out to me and telling me to come back, but I just ran out the door before I could even get dressed. When I finally got myself cleaned up, I realized people were looking at me. I felt so humiliated that I just ran back to the hotel. Once there, I took a long shower and then crawled into bed. I just laid there and thought about what I had done and how you could never forgive me. I cried until I passed out. When Jenny wouldn't go on, I asked if she was okay. I realized that I hadn't really reacted to much of what she said because I already knew what was going to happen next. I berated myself for not being ready to talk about David and not wanting her to notice anything. After a few minutes, she felt better, and I asked her what happened on Sunday. She said she woke up the next morning and found the stripper next to her in bed. She didn't know how he got there, but it all happened in an instant. She ran to the bathroom where she threw up and then couldn't stop crying. She confirmed David's account that they had talked and he asked her not to tell me anything. Leaving for the airport, she ran into Megan in the hotel lobby where they had a big fight. Jenny told her to stay away, that she couldn't believe that Megan had allowed herself to do such a thing after she had promised to look out for her. Although she was angry at her friend, she felt more humiliated by her own actions. Megan said that Jenny had wanted to act this way ever since she got married, and that she was doing my wife a favor. It ended with Jenny leaving in a cab and Megan returning to the room. Since Jenny left early, she didn't see Megan again until she left. They talked on the phone a few times since that evening, but never saw each other. When she finished, I didn't know what to say. I expected evasiveness, thought she'd try to shift the blame, maybe lie a couple times to make herself look better. Hell, after watching the video, I wouldn't be surprised if she said she hadn't consented. The one thing I hadn't counted on was her being completely honest and even taking more blame than she deserved. It was unnerving. Her story about Saturday was disturbing, but I couldn't pick up on any dishonesty in it, so I left it at that. I let her cry for a long time, wanting to comfort her but unable to overcome my own problems. I also wanted to tell her about the tape, but couldn't figure out how to do it without causing her more pain. To know that David had taped her acting like a total slut would be horrible, and to know that I had watched it would be even worse. I didn't see the point of it, so I decided to keep it to myself. When I finally spoke, I was surprised by the hoarseness in my voice. "Thank you for being honest with me," I know it was hard. She smiled weakly at my praise. Just looking at her made me want to shake her for doing that to us. I also wanted more than anything to hold her until she stopped crying. Part of me felt awful that she had to suffer through this. I still loved her so much it hurt. Everything was so complicated, I didn't know what to do. I drove her home and then went to Steve's house. While I waited for Danny to finish playing, I went outside with him and told him everything, leaving out specifics. He agreed that I had done the right thing by not telling her. He also noted how much better Danielle had gotten over the past couple weeks. He did that a lot, and I realized it was his not-so-subtle way of hinting that I shouldn't cut Jenny out of my life. I agreed that Danny had gotten better and told him that it made me feel even harder. As we left, I hoped that the time spent with my daughter would help me pull myself together. Time with her was the only thing that kept me sane. After that, Jenny and I had 2 weeks of sessions that were much more productive. Every time Jenny tried to apologize or belittle herself, Brian cut her off. He didn't want to hear about blame or any of us being sorry. It didn't address the real issues that still loomed before us. My daughter had one parent and one step-parent living in separate homes. She had no say and didn't understand why the adults couldn't work things out. Jenny spent weeks doing nothing but punishing herself. She neglected her health, her job, and basically hid from life since the truth came out. I may have been the biggest mess of all. My punishment of Jenny caused me guilt, ruined my relationship with her family, devastated my daughter, and caused a rift between me and my closest friends. After I reconciled and allowed her to date Danny again, things got better, but there was still awkwardness between me and my closest people. The day before our 4th session together, I dropped Danny off at Jenny's mom's house for the night. I needed to make a decision and stick to it. Prolonging this process was doing nothing but harm to all of us. I headed to one of the bars we liked to frequent. There was a band playing there that I had wanted to see for a long time. I sat alone all evening, unable to enjoy anything. After the show, I went for another long walk. I seem to have been doing that a lot lately. I wondered if the isolation was helping me think more clearly, or maybe it was making it harder for me to see the big picture. I finally dragged myself home around dawn and left a message saying I wouldn't be at work. I decided what to do, but I didn't feel any better about the decision. The meeting was scheduled for late afternoon. I arrived at the church office about 10 minutes late because there was some problem with Danny's delivery. I tried to call to warn Brian, but the call went to voicemail. When I pulled up, I saw Jenny's car and hurried to the door. I went inside, but there was no one in the lobby as usual. When I got to Brian's office, something I heard made me stop. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, it just happened so fast. Maybe I should just leave. Brian was shocked. Jenny, you can't say that. He's so upset all the time. I just can't get over what I've done to him. I love him more than anything in the world, and here I've ruined his life. Maybe he'd be better off if I just left. Jenny looked miserable. But you don't want that, do you? She paused. No, I want to find a way to fix this mess, but how can you fix something so broken? I don't want to hurt Danny, but if it helps John, I'm willing to move back to New York and start over. I heard her voice break as she finished. Jenny, I can't tell you what to do, but I urge you to talk to John about every major decision you make. He may not be in the state of mind you had hoped for, but he's trying. You can't expect him to just put what happened out of his mind, can you? Brian, you don't understand. I'm not thinking about this because I'm unhappy with the way he's treating me. I spent 6 months trying to find a way to make it up to him, hoping he'd never find out. I knew how awful it was, but I underestimated how much it hurt him. I don't think he'll ever be able to look at me without thinking about what I did. If I can't find a way to make things better for him, then I should leave so he doesn't have to look at me anymore. I just want him to be happy, no matter what it costs me. I owe him. I didn't feel like getting into this story, so I walked back to the front door and closed it loudly. As I approached Brian's office, I started talking loudly so they would realize I was here. Hey guys, sorry I'm late. As I rounded the corner, I saw Jenny facing me and wiping her eyes with a tissue. Is everything okay? I tried to feign surprise. Brian replied, Yeah, we were just talking about something while we waited. Jenny, do you mind continuing? She nodded. Then let's pick up where we left off last week. You two have made a lot of progress in dealing with the breakup. Now the question is where to go from here. Jenny, what do you hope to accomplish? She was silent for a long time. I thought she was going to beg, because I heard what was outside the office. She looked at me and surprised me with a very honest answer. I want John to give me another chance. Brian waited a few moments to make sure she wasn't going to elaborate, and then replied, Well, that's not exactly what I had in mind. Why don't you come up with a shorter-term goal that we can work on while John gives us an answer? John? I looked at him, pondering how I should answer. Then I looked at Jenny, who had turned away. I could tell from the way she was sitting that she was feeling incredibly lonely. She probably expected me to hate her forever, but she still came to these sessions. In the park, she truthfully answered all my questions, even when I realized they were humiliating. Whether she hoped I might someday forgive her, or whether she was sincerely willing to do anything to make amends for her transgression, I could not guess. In the end, her motives didn't matter to me. I lowered my gaze to the floor. I want Jenny to come home. I waited a moment before I looked up. When I looked up, I saw that the bomb I had just dropped had taken them both by surprise. Brian sat there, completely shocked. We had never discussed the possibility of my reconciliation. As far as he knew, the best outcome we could hope for was an amicable parting, so we could both move on with our lives. Jenny looked at me incredulously, as if she thought it was a cruel joke. At that moment, I realized how deeply I had hurt her. Jenny, I love you and I miss you. I know I didn't give you a reason to believe we had a chance, but you tried anyway. There's no way to undo what you did, but if you want to come home and try to start over, I'll do everything I can to make it work. I paused, then added, For us and for Danny. I waited to see what her reaction would be. Without a word, she rose from her chair, walked in front of me, and knelt down. Putting her head in my lap and wrapping her arms around my hips, she began to cry again. I finally stopped fighting the urge to comfort her and gently stroked her hair with my hand. Finally, I stood up and lifted her to her feet. I kissed her for the first time in 2 months, and she snuggled up to me. After a moment, I gently pushed her away. There's something we need to talk about first, okay? She looked at me with some uncertainty but nodded. I looked away to give our host a chance to speak. Brian, can I continue or do you have any questions? He couldn't help but laugh. John, I think we've had too many meetings like this. That sounds like something I would say. He indicated that we should continue. Jenny, I've given this a lot of thought. We need to work out ground rules that we both agree on. Things are very confusing and I need things I can count on before we can move forward. As I outlined my requests, she listened intently. When I was done, she eagerly got down to business. It's okay. I'll do my best to make it up to you. Brian spoke up. I don't think that's what he wants, do you, John? No, it's not. Seeing the puzzled look on Jen's face, I clumsily tried to explain the feelings I didn't fully understand. I married a strong, confident woman who changed my life. I don't want you to come back a man who is willing to do anything for another chance. I want the woman I married. Think of it like a broken glass. If we just glue it back together, it won't last long and it won't make anyone happy. If, however, we take the shards, melt it down and start over, we can make it strong again. Wouldn't you agree, Brian? He looked impressed. Yes, that's really very insightful. When a couple goes through a situation like you went through, many times the cause is that one spouse is trying too hard. The imbalance it creates leads to unforeseen problems. The spouse trying to be accommodating may end up feeling unappreciated and resentful. The other spouse may lose respect for the person who constantly wants to be humiliated. The best intentions can lead to the worst results. I took the lead again. There should be rules because of what happened, but they aren't to punish you or test your loyalty. I expect you to propose your own rules, and I fully expect you to stick to whatever ones we both agree to. I couldn't help but stroke her cheek with my fingers as I spoke. When we first started dating, it took us over a year to get to know each other and figure out how we should go about things. If we want to start over and not waste so much time, we need to set up rules that neither of us can break for any reason. Hopefully, this will give us a fresh start. Jenny tried to keep up with everything, but it was clearly not easy. My announcement came as such a shock to her that she hardly knew what she was talking about. I know she would agree to anything if I gave her a chance to redeem herself, but I needed her to realize that I was asking for something more. If I was going to open up to her after what she did, She had to be willing to give me everything she had. It wasn't just that I was worried about getting hurt again. I wasn't going to open up to Danielle for another round unless we had a firm agreement. No. We spent the rest of the session discussing what we both needed from each other if we were going to try this. After we agreed, she went home to tell her family everything. I stayed behind for a while to talk things over with Brian. I'm a little concerned about your quick mood swings, John. When you do something hastily, it can do more harm than good in the long run. It wasn't an accident. I've been trying to figure it out for weeks now, but I didn't think I could. This week I decided I had to make a decision and stick to it. Brian looked like he was trying to figure something out. Okay, so you decided to make a decision, but why such a drastic change? I finally realized that in all the time I've known her, Jenny has never acted the way I saw in the video. She never got drunk and rarely crossed the threshold of mild intoxication. I thought about who I wanted Danielle to be like when she grows up, and only one person came to mind. Jenny. Something happened there that she couldn't handle. I still hate what she did, but I don't believe she would do it again. If I accept that this was an isolated incident, then I have to wonder about what you told me about the victim or the man. Some people see the man as someone who will not tolerate crap from anyone and will throw her out on the street regardless of the consequences. Some will punish her for months or years before letting her come back. I've decided that for me, being a man means taking care of my daughter first and foremost. She needs Jenny at home. Brian still didn't look convinced. But it sounds like you're trying to make everyone else happy. Is that what you want? I don't know how to answer that. None of this is what I want. You're asking me to choose between two pathetic things, and then you ask me which one is less pathetic than the other. I want to build a relationship with her, but I have no idea how long that will take. I don't know if I should do it with her at Nicole's or if she would be better off at home. I'm not looking forward to the problems we'll have, knowing that I can't just walk away like I've been doing since she left. In the end, it's just making a decision and then trying to live with the consequences. He thought for a moment before answering. Well, I can tell you've thought it through, John. When you walked through the door the first time, I didn't think it was possible. I'm glad I was wrong. If I had to guess, I'd say you're right. She loves you very much, so if you can keep the relationship going long enough to trust each other again, I think it will work out in the end. I hope so, for both our sakes. Brian looked at me seriously. But now that you've taken responsibility, I think it's time for us to move on. I looked at him anxiously. I don't do professional counseling. I just listen and try to help people when I can. I have a very good friend who is an excellent therapist and is very experienced in the problems you are facing. His name is William, and I am asking you to take Jenny and meet with him. No matter how much you think you have it all figured out, it's not going to be easy and you don't want it to affect Danielle or ruin what you are trying to accomplish. When I still didn't look thrilled, he added, if it helps, I can have Steve threaten to kick your ass. We both laughed, which helped ease the tension. As I left, I thanked him for all he had done and prepared for another big challenge. That Saturday, she moved back in. It was wonderful for Danny. She and Jenny spent hours talking and playing. At the end of the evening, Danielle insisted that we both put her to bed. She wouldn't let Jenny leave and held her hand tightly until she fell asleep. This reinforced my confidence that I had done the right thing. I couldn't imagine a better person to care for my daughter. Afterward, Jen and I had a quiet conversation and then retired to our bedrooms, where we stayed until we agreed to change our arrangement. It was a very ambiguous homecoming for me. I was thrilled at how happy Danielle was. I was also delighted to see how coming home had an immediate effect on Jenny. She immediately became different, more relaxed. For me, it wasn't so easy. Although I still knew I loved her, being so close without real intimacy reminded me of how messed up things had gotten. If it was just the two of us, I would just avoid her until I was ready, but for my daughter, something like this would be painfully obvious. I just smiled and tried to savor the fact that Danny was back to normal. It went on like that for 3 weeks. Jenny was very respectful of my feelings. She didn't try to pressure me, but made it clear that she was available if I wanted to talk or anything else. We started seeing William the first week after Jenny got back. He was doing a good job, but I didn't feel the connection that I had with Brian. He liked to talk about our feelings and do exercises that were supposed to help us see things from each other's perspective. I tried not to be stubborn, but I felt like it was a waste of time. In the fourth week, I think Jenny started to get a little frustrated with me for not showing her any warmth. It was nice, but not much changed in my mind. It felt like I was stuck. I felt more comfortable around her than when she first came back, but I had no desire to touch her. Another 3 weeks passed, during which nothing changed, when she finally demanded that we talk. John, I'm getting worried. I appreciate you asking me to come back, and I'll wait as long as you need me to, but I don't feel like you really want me here. She looked at me as if she was trying to read my mind. I averted my eyes. I wouldn't ask you to come home if I didn't want you here. Obviously, my acting wasn't very good. Please, honey, something is bothering you and I want you to talk to me about it. How are we going to get through this if we don't talk about everything that's bothering us? It's one of our rules. No secrets. You wanted me to come back and fight for our marriage. Well, now you've gotten your wish. You're not going anywhere until you tell me what this is all about. She put her hands on her hips defiantly, and I realized she wasn't going to let me off the hook. Before I invited her back, I decided not to tell her about David and the tape. I didn't feel it was necessary to make her live with that knowledge and thought it would be okay. I realized now that it had crossed my mind every time I thought about us getting close. Now that I was on the spot, I didn't have time to think about it and it all spilled out. I told her all about meeting David, listening to his side of the story and watching the video. I told her that all of this was for a reason. Megan had planned the whole thing before they even left. Finally, I told her about destroying the tape when I couldn't watch it anymore. I swear I wasn't holding a grudge against you, Jen. I just couldn't get those thoughts out of my head. She stared at me in bewilderment. I saw her bottom lip quiver and realized she might have completely broken down. I immediately regretted telling her that. She squeezed past me and ran up the stairs, ignoring my pleas for her to stop. I heard the bedroom door slam shut. Although I had been trying to get her out of the room for hours, she completely ignored me. I called her mom, who was watching Danielle today, and asked if she could stay the night. I told her that Jenny and I had a fight, but not to worry. Jenny stayed out all night. I fell asleep on the couch waiting for her. When I woke up the next morning, there was a blanket around me. Confused, I wondered how it had gotten there. I reached up and tried to stretch my stiff neck when I felt something with my foot. I looked down and saw Jenny curled up on the couch across from me, using my leg as a pillow. I looked at her sleeping, tear-swollen eyes, and wished I could do something to ease her condition. I quietly slid off the couch and made my way to the kitchen where I made breakfast and coffee. When it was ready, I brought it into the living room and set it in front of her. I shook her lightly by the shoulder until she opened her eyes. It took her a second to focus, then she sat up quickly and reached into my arms. She spoke in a shaky voice. I'm sorry you had to go through all of this because of what I did. Until yesterday, I thought I had already hurt you as much as possible. It must have been horrible for you to go through that alone. I don't know what else to say, she started sobbing again. I'm so sorry. That's enough for today, I scolded. I made every effort to make breakfast, and I expect you to eat every bite. When she looked at me like she was going to protest, I firmly told her that she had to take care of herself or I would, so I just fed her like I would have done with my daughter. When she started to eat on her own, I nestled behind her and started rubbing her neck and shoulders. There was so much tension in them that I wondered how she could even sleep. When she was done, I took the dishes to the kitchen and she went upstairs and took a shower. Afterward, she came down to me and said it was my turn, that I smelled like the couch. I laughed as I walked up the stairs. The hot water felt good to the touch as I tried to stretch after an uncomfortable night's sleep. I took my time, my thoughts were occupied with breakfast. I made a vow to myself that the next time the opportunity presented itself, I would try to tactfully broach the subject of us finally finalizing her house party. It was a bit of a dilemma because I wasn't sure if I should do something romantic or keep it quiet. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it and make her feel pressured. After yesterday's events, I thought she might be a little timid and not want to do anything physical. But it didn't matter. She'd been letting me know for weeks now that she was ready, waiting patiently for me. It would be easy for me to do the same. I stepped out of the shower and dried myself off, feeling noticeably better. I brushed my teeth, shaved, put on deodorant, and even spritzed on some cologne. Today would be a great day to take her out and do something special. Then we could pick up Danny and do something as a family. My mood continued to lift as I planned the day. I had thought of everything and was ready to surprise her. I opened the door and saw Jen sitting on my bed. Surprise, she said a little nervously. Jenny stood up, looking a little unsure. John, I know I promised I wouldn't push you until you were ready, but I need you, please. And I should have said something immediately, but the shock of seeing her in this state was overwhelming. I was also struck by how beautiful she looked. She still hadn't gained enough weight to regain her former figure, but instead of detracting from her appearance, it made her look even more innocent and fragile. I fell into my old habit of staring for long periods of time. Tears came to her eyes. John, please. I know how you feel. If you'll only be with me once, I promise I won't ask you again. I realized she misunderstood my hesitation and stepped forward to hug her. Jenny, you don't understand. I want this too. I saw her expression change and become hopeful. I was afraid you wouldn't want to, given the way things have been, especially after last night. I don't want you, John. I want you. As we got down to it, after a while, I noticed she started to cry. I put my hand on her shoulder. Jenny, what's wrong? Did I do something wrong? No, nothing wrong, she said slowly, but nothing right either. Noticing my perplexed look, she continued. John, we've both been putting off talking about this since the night I left. I think we need to do it now. I wasn't so sure. Jenny, we just got things back on track. Why now? She looked up at me, her eyes reflecting a sadness that stunned me. How can you say that? Nothing is set in place. When I couldn't think of anything to say in response, she said something that made my stomach churn. Be honest, weren't you just thinking about the video? It hurt you that I could enjoy myself with those men and Megan. It bothers you that I feel something is missing in our marriage, which is why I did those things. You don't know if I can be trusted because I did those things and then lied to you, she finished wearily. I tried to remain calm, but she was closer than I wanted to admit. That's a pretty big list. Is there anything else? She looked at me again. You think I liked being with them more than you because I let him... She couldn't say David's name out loud. The look on my face must have given me away. How could she have gotten to know me so well? I felt ashamed that I could be so transparent. She looked away for a moment and then looked at me again with tears in her eyes. She refused to wipe them away. Was I right? When I nodded, she told me to get started. I hated the very thought of it. The reason I liked Brian so much was because he didn't make us do this kind of nonsense. If she wanted me to know how she felt, she should have just told me that. I moved my head to come up with a list. You're embarrassed that I saw you do this. You're sad that I had to see it and what happened between us. You want me to let you make it up to me. I tried, but I couldn't think of anything else to say. Well? I tried to understand from her eyes, but I couldn't read her expression. It was almost exactly the same as the first time I'd seen her at Nicole's house. Kind of aloof, but still clearly distressed. Not even close. She didn't elaborate, and I felt uneasy. What do you mean? I wondered what I might have missed. I'm sad because I have to live the rest of my life knowing you think of me as a whore. I was shocked. Wow, I've never said anything like that. I love you. I made you come home so we could make things right. Where the hell did you get the idea that I felt that way about you? She continued to look at me with the same look and replied, It's not an idea, it's the truth. When I couldn't think of anything to answer, she continued, What's the saying? She paused for a moment. Oh yes, you are what you choose to be. I've lived my whole life without doing anything like what happened in New Orleans. I chose to be a good person, I didn't lie, people respected me, and I was loved. In 2 days I ruined everything and I can never get it back. You will never look at me again without thinking about the fact that for 48 hours I chose to be a whore. I tried to interrupt her, but she stopped me. It's my fault this all happened. I don't blame you for anything. Somewhere in the back of my mind I wanted to believe that you could forgive me, but I was wrong. You were thinking about the video while we were doing this, weren't you? Now I was at a complete loss. I was trying to figure out how to defend myself. After all, how could I help what was flashing through my mind? It had only been 2 months since I'd seen that damn video. How could anyone get it out of their head? I ended up nodding stupidly. You weren't doing it for me. You were doing it to prove that you could do it better than anyone else and that I didn't need anyone else. You wanted me to realize that you were the best. I still don't realize how wrong that was. It was the first moment in the last 4 months, and you used it to trump the guys who treated me like a whore. What makes you think I'd want you to treat me the way they did, only better? I stared at her, stunned. This was quickly getting out of hand. I didn't. I didn't overpraise anyone. I was just trying to make you happy. She looked frustrated. You don't understand, I was already happy. I didn't go to New Orleans to have fun. I didn't go there to be used and then thrown away. I didn't like the way I felt, and I don't ever want to do anything like that again. You keep thinking that I did it because of something you did wrong, or that I wanted something you couldn't give me. Her expression softened. I've never regretted anything in our relationship other than the problems we had. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I never had fantasies about other guys. I never felt like I was missing anything by being with you. I made a terrible decision. I still don't understand why I did it, but I would do anything to get it all back. For 6 months, I lived with it every day without being able to talk to you about it. It was killing me in ways I can't describe. And now that you're finally giving me another chance, I find out that you think you need to compete with her. I couldn't take it anymore. I saw the goddamn video. You loved it. What exactly am I missing? I suddenly realized I was screaming. Jenny lay down on the bed and curled up in a ball. Oh shit, Jenny, I'm so sorry. Honey, I didn't mean it. I had no idea what to say. As she sobbed, I tried to comfort her. When nothing worked, I just sat there feeling helpless. I couldn't believe I could get angry so quickly. How could I have treated her like that right after she opened up to me? It's okay. I told you I understand. Her voice sounded thin and scared. I don't care if this is the worst fight we've ever had. We're going to talk it out now. I don't want to stall any longer. She began to gain strength. Yes, you saw the way I acted in the video. I can't deny anything. I won't make excuses. But you didn't see them leave and me cry and fall asleep. You didn't see me in so much pain the next morning that I couldn't leave the room and Megan had to bring me pain pills from one of my bridesmaids. You can't imagine how humiliating it was to have the bride ask me what happened and if I was okay. By this time, she'd gotten her bearings. I blew it. She looked me in the eye and didn't flinch. I acted like a whore, and they treated me like one. The only thing missing was the money on the nightstand. I love you with all my heart, but I still did all those nasty things you saw. I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I know that if we stay together, we'll fight one day, maybe a week from now, maybe 10 years from now, and you'll remember that video. It's forever, John. I can never get back what we had. The way you looked at me like I was someone special. She stopped, suddenly unable to continue. I reached out to grab her, but she slammed her fists into my chest. Unable to stand it, I just pulled her to me and hugged her. She stopped struggling and started crying, snuggling against my chest. I felt her tears running down my skin and decided it was my turn to confess. I didn't know what else to do. When I asked you to come home, I wasn't sure if I was ready. I just knew I had to do it for Danielle. I felt her shoulders slump, and she pressed even tighter against me. I did it because I couldn't bear to see her so upset. I couldn't bear to see you in pain. I'm sorry if that's what made it all happen. I was just trying to make everyone happy. I felt her push away from me slightly. I looked down and saw her looking up at me. What about you? I just shrugged. What about me? I felt like shit no matter what. I've missed you. You're my best friend and lover. If things weren't going so well on the love front, I'd be okay with that. If you two were happy, we could work out the rest. Damn it, John, don't you understand? Without love, you can't solve the rest of the issues. Why would you decide anything with me after what happened if you don't love me? I didn't say I didn't love you. I just didn't know how long it would take for us to get things back on track. You don't understand how hard it's been for me. Every night Danielle asks me why I won't forgive you and tells me how much she misses you. Our friends hint that things would be so much better if I gave you another chance. And your family, who I adore, hints at it every chance they get. Besides, I missed you so much I thought I was going crazy. I turned away in disappointment. She touched my face with her hand. I really liked the way she did it. It was a small gesture, but It was always special to me. I understand how hard it was for you. That's why I never pushed for anything. Even when I knew you were holding back, I didn't push because I wanted you to talk to me when you were ready. I'd wait, no matter how long it took. She took a deep breath and then continued. John, if we kept doing this the way we started today, what would tomorrow be like? I didn't know what she was getting at, so I just shrugged. If you gave me the best experience of my life, what happens next? What happens in a month or two when everything is back to normal? If you're looking at this as a competition, then when things aren't perfect, I'm going to have to start faking it so you don't worry? I even liked it when one of us wasn't in the mood and we just hugged each other. I have to admit, I hadn't thought about what was going to happen next today. I didn't really think about it. I just wanted the first time to be special. Anything we did together would be special. The way you started was great, but I didn't come here for a bunch of orgasms. I came here because I was lonely. I missed my husband, and I wanted him to make love to me. After all the things you've been through, I wanted our first time to be one that wouldn't remind you of what I did. I wanted to give you what I couldn't give anyone else. Myself. The way we did it together at the end was exactly what I wanted. I just wanted to feel you inside me and touch you. It felt wonderful because it was with you, the only person I've ever loved enough to give myself completely to. It was something special, just for us. Later, when we both don't have to think about the past, we can do whatever we want. I'll do anything you ask me to do, just not share you with anyone else. In the meantime, I want things to happen slowly, and for us to get used to each other again. That's what I need, okay? I sat in silence, wrapping my arms around her. I had a lot to think about. I couldn't believe I was thinking about this in a different way than she was. I couldn't feel bad about her request because I was the one who insisted that she not come home as a maid, trying to make amends. She was doing exactly what I had insisted she do, standing up for what was right. It occurred to me that my resistance to the new counselor, my reluctance to tell her about the video, and my not allowing myself to get too close to her after she came home were all connected. When I first found out about her trip, I was angry. No, furious. Some part of me hated her and wanted to make her suffer. When I found out that she was tricked and she didn't do it on purpose, I wasn't angry anymore, but I still didn't want to get close to her. Even when I invited her home, I didn't picture myself with her, and I didn't trust her. I couldn't understand it at the time, or maybe I didn't want to face it. But she was right. I was afraid. I was afraid she was acting like that with Megan and those two men because I wasn't enough. Until today, when I thought about what she did, I let my insecurities drive me. Now I was tired of being afraid. I refused to live in fear of what might happen. It wouldn't make me happy, and Jenny couldn't be happy either. We both deserved better than that. Now that everything was out in the open, maybe we could both finally be happy. I knew her better than anyone else, and I had no doubt that she was being completely honest with me. Before all of this happened, I had considered myself an incredibly lucky man. Very few men find a woman who can completely change their lives the way Jenny did for me. I loved everything about her, especially the fact that she forced me to be a better person than I would have been without her. Things still weren't perfect, but I finally felt like I wanted her home and that I needed to be her husband again. Hugging her tightly, I assured her that I forgave her and would never use her act to punish her again. We lay in bed for several hours just touching each other and talking. Suddenly a thought occurred to me. Jenny, what were those pills you said you were taking? Hi. Hello, David. This is John, Jenny's husband. I need you to do something for me. What? I sounded suspicious. Is that not? I told him what I needed to do to get this damn thing over with once and for all. When I was done, it didn't surprise me that he said no. I wasn't in the mood to take no for an answer. I have a problem. I have a videotape of my wife being taken advantage of by 3 men conspiring to get her drunk and seduce her. I'm sure the authorities don't approve of such things. At the very least, it would be a nuisance if the cops dragged you out of that fancy law office to question you about it. He was quiet for a few seconds, then said with a slight tremor in his voice, "So now you're going to blackmail me?" I sighed. "No, I'm not. Your behavior on Sunday after the party made me change my mind about doing something to get back at you. I wanted to point out something I could have done. I'm not going to stalk you or threaten you to get what I want. You have my word." However, I think you know that you owe a great debt to both of us, and I'd like you to do it because it's the right thing to do. I'm not sure I could get a regular lawyer involved. And even if I could, it would mean getting someone else involved. I don't want to do that to Jenny. He took a minute to think about it, and then agreed to all my requests. For the next week, Jenny and I didn't make love. It was like the first time was so awkward that we were afraid to try again. I know part of me was worried that I would make another mistake. The weekend was busy and we did nothing but hold each other and kiss quietly. On Tuesday, my package arrived at work. I signed for it and left immediately, hoping it would be over. As I pulled up to the house, I waited at the door for a while and took a deep breath. It was important to me to do the right thing. Since I hadn't been able to win Jenny back the way I had hoped, it was important to do it for her. Even if she didn't see it the same way I did, and it didn't matter much to her, I needed it for myself. My marriage was broken, and Danny and I were suffering terribly as a result. I couldn't just sit back and let myself be victimized. Brian's words rang in my head again. The door opened. "What are you doing here?" asked Megan suspiciously. I glared back at the woman who had done so much for me and my family. I had never raised my hand to a woman, never even pushed her. In that first moment, I had an overwhelming urge to not just hit her, but to beat the shit out of her. I pulled myself together, and the moment passed. "I'm here because we need to talk." She looked at me nervously. "Look, now's not a good time. I was just about to leave." "Well, I suggest you change your plans. This is for you." I held out a manila envelope to her. She took it and took a quick look at the contents. I was very pleased by the change in her haughty expression. Her hands trembled as she put the papers down and looked up at me. "Do you want to come in?" she said quietly. "You think I want to be alone with you?" I snorted derisively. "I'm happy where I am. This is a copy of my lawsuit against you for alienation of affection. If you look at the bottom, you'll see that I'm being handled by a very powerful firm out of New Orleans. They recommended that I sue you for $10 million. Her face reflected fear and amazement. $10 million? Are you out of your mind? I'll never make that much in my life. No, but I can get a judgment against you and I'll get most of your paycheck until you're old and gray. Do you give me all your attention? She licked her lips nervously and nodded. This is a copy of the document. You have not been officially served with it. The original will be placed in the safe, along with the videotape David made Friday night in the hotel room with Jenny. Her mouth literally dropped open. I guess David never said he videotapes all his private parties. I paused, but she didn't say anything back. The funny thing is, I might not have had a win-win case if you hadn't decided to walk Jenny to the back of the room, right up to the camera, when you lied to her about what was about to happen several times. She tried to speak, faltered, and then asked timidly, "What do you want?" I let her blush for a few seconds before I finished. "I want you to tell me the truth about the whole weekend. You don't know what I've already found out, so be careful. If you lie to me, or if I think you're lying to me, you can expect someone to come along and hand you the original, and there's no turning back." It took some time, but she told me everything. Her story confirmed what Jenny and David had already told me. There were a few new details, but nothing that I hadn't expected. When she was done, I asked a few questions, which she answered comprehensively. When I was satisfied, I turned to leave. I stopped and turned back to her. "One more thing, Megan. I hope you realize that if I find out that you tried to contact Jenny, told anyone else about New Orleans, sent someone a copy of the website video, or interfered in our lives in any way, we will meet in court. Do you understand me?" She nodded with tears in her eyes. I wanted to rejoice in the pain I had caused her, but the truth was that she was a pathetic, broken woman. There was no pleasure in that. Part of me wished she was a guy so I could hit her. Maybe I would have felt a little better. At least I could give Jenny some peace. On the way home, I called Steve and asked if they could do me a favor and pick up Danielle. I explained the situation and he said he would be glad to. When I got to the house, he was already there. I explained to Jenny that I wanted us to have a free night. Although she looked like she suspected something, she didn't object. She hugged and kissed Danielle and then watched her and Steve leave. She turned to me again and said, "Okay, what's going on? I know when you're planning something." I sat her down on the couch and walked out to the car. I came back with another envelope that I held out to her. Jenny, when you told me you were afraid of what might happen in the future if someone saw the video of the party, I decided to call David and ask for his help. Noticing her astonished look, I quickly continued. He found a lawyer at his company that he trusted and asked for a couple favors. They sent a letter threatening a lawsuit against the website, saying that you were drugged and that we were going to report you to the police. Since all we asked for was to change the video to remove you from it, I guess they figured fighting it would be harder than it was worth. This is a letter from them acknowledging the complaint and that they cut you out of the video. I glanced briefly at the next letter, then handed it to her. This is an apology from David. He expresses his relief that we were able to work things out. He sent the original copy of the tape and attached a notarized document swearing there are no other copies. No one else can see you. The third thing is a lawsuit drawn up against Megan. Because of what she said on the tape and what she told David, she won't stand a chance in court. I just got back from talking to her and told her that I would postpone the lawsuit unless she tries to contact you or interfere in our lives again. Jenny looked puzzled. What do you mean? Who do you think sent me the website URL? She went from confusion to fury. So that's how you found out. That bitch sent it to you? I'm going to kill her. I gently touched her arm and tried to calm her down. No, you won't. Her act was vindictive and petty, but you couldn't keep lying to me about it indefinitely. The guilt would have eventually alienated us from each other. She did us a favor by making us admit it. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to worry about her getting involved again and ever telling anyone else. You know she thinks she's in love with you, right? Jenny looked stunned. Are you sure? She admitted to everything. She followed you from New York, messed with you about our problems, set you up to cheat on me, and made sure she was in on it. She tried to keep us apart, hoping she could make you fall in love with her. She swears that when you were friends in New York, you hinted many times that you had deeper feelings for her than just friendship. Jenny's indignant look was extra proof to me. It doesn't matter if it's true, but that's how she took it. If it was a guy friend, you'd never trust him the way you trusted her. Since you never realized how she felt about you, you were open to her manipulation. In retrospect, I realize I never liked her, and I wish I hadn't said so. Anyway, from the way you acted Saturday morning, she knew that Friday didn't have the effect on you that she was hoping for. She wanted it to happen again. She'd gotten it into her head that if you had a wild enough time, you wouldn't want to go back to your old life. She knew the details of the party. All the women invited had been warned about what was going to happen. When she got the pills for you, her maid of honor warned her that they were very strong and shouldn't be put down with alcohol. That's when she got the idea. Megan thought that if you got drunk, she could get to you again, but she knew you wouldn't let your guard down like you did the night before. She didn't tell you what the pills were and made sure you took a couple before you left for the party. After a few drinks, she realized you were out of it and started working on you to get you to do something. She knew they were videotaping, so if you hadn't told me when you'd be back, she could have let me know without getting her hands dirty. She waited a while after you returned, hoping you would calm down and start talking to her again. When she realized that wasn't going to happen, she sent me an email. I'm not sure if it was because she was still hoping something would happen to you or just out of spite. I told her that's a pretty shitty way to treat someone you claim to love, but I don't know if anything will get through to her. I took a breath and then took Jenny's hands in mine. Look, I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to deal with this again. You know, what you said about me never looking at you the same way again wasn't true. I may not have handled it all very well, but I love you. I asked you to come back because I knew I couldn't feel that way about anyone else. Maybe I did it too quickly, trying to make everyone else happy, but I never doubted that things would be good between us again. It's going to take some time, but I'll never stop working on it. You are everything to me. We kissed and hugged each other tightly. Feeling her trembling, I was glad I could finally lift some of this burden off her shoulders. And then I realized I'd forgotten about the other surprise. I gently pushed her away from me. Jenny, I have something else for you. I pulled the last document out of the envelope and held it out to her. This is something that should have been taken care of a long time ago. Jenny's eyes filled with tears as she began to read the papers. I watched with satisfaction as the tears began to flow freely. She carefully set the papers aside and threw herself into my arms, clinging to me so tightly it hurt. She lifted her head and looked into my eyes. Are you sure? I smiled, knowing that this selfless act would help ease her fear and pain more than all my other acts combined. It's official. You are now not only my wife, but Danielle's mother as well. There's no going back. Now we have to make this work. She turned and leaned her back against my chest, looking lovingly at the adoption papers from David's office. I stroked her gently as she read. I let her stay there until she was ready to move. She took the papers to another room and put them in a safe place. Then she returned and, taking my hand, led me up the stairs without saying a word. There was no need to. 2 months later, Brian was working in his office when the phone rang. Hello. Brian, it's John. Can I come in to see you for a minute? Sure, I have some free time around 5. Can you come over then? I'll come. As I entered his office, I thought about how much had changed since my first visit. Reconciliation with Jenny, my own idea of how things should be done, and how we'd reoriented our lives. At Brian's quiet request, we started attending his church and found many positives in our lives by helping others. Danielle loved attending church, and I loved seeing her discover the things I had been raised in. Everything was almost perfect. It always is until the bottom falls out. Brian met me at the front door. John, good to see you. Your call sounded urgent. Is everything okay? No, it's not okay. Something terrible happened yesterday. He led me into his office where I sat down on the familiar couch. Things haven't been smooth sailing for weeks. She's been pushing me away and making tons of excuses to avoid our contact. I wanted to talk to her about it, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Then yesterday, I came home early and heard her talking to her sister in the kitchen. I was about to go in to say hello when I heard her say, "If that bastard thinks I'm going to keep doing things my way, he's out of his mind." They were talking about a lot of things. I couldn't catch most of it, but what I did hear was devastating. It was obvious that she was preparing for a major confrontation about me doing things my way. He looked concerned. That's very sad. Did you talk to her about it? No, I was too upset. Noticing his disapproving look, I tried to justify myself. I couldn't just barge into the kitchen in front of her sister and start a fight. I left in my car, and when I came back, Nicole was gone. Danielle and Jenny were having dinner, so there was no chance. When we went to bed, I just didn't feel up to it. I said I was tired and laid there until she fell asleep. Then I went to the living room and sat there most of the night. Things have been so good between us for the last couple months. I can't believe she feels that way. I don't know what to do. Today she called me at work and said we need to talk. She said it's something that can't wait and she wants to do it with just the two of us, so she's sending Danny to Nicole. She asked me to meet her at the hotel bar where we used to go dancing. Brian and I talked for a while, but didn't accomplish much. I didn't really expect it. I just needed someone to talk to before I went to meet Jenny. It brought me back to where I started all this. Drinking alone at the bar, waiting for what I fear could be the end of my marriage. After going through so much and fighting my way back, I couldn't believe it could end like this. After hearing some of the things she said to her sister, I didn't know if she even wanted to continue working on the relationship. Even if she did, I'd taken her back on the terms we'd agreed to, and it had only been 4 months. If she was going to demand that I drop everything, it was too much. It would take a lot more time to regain her former trust. If she refuses to come to her senses, I'll have no choice but to end the relationship. 7 months later. Lately, I've been thinking about that night all the time. It showed me that things were still not right between Jenny and I, better than William's lectures, Brian's, or any of my friends. I think I made a number of poor judgments about both Jenny and myself from the beginning. My friends saw some of those mistakes and tried to subtly help me find my way. I'm lucky to have people who care about me enough to try, even though I don't always like what they have to say. As I walk down the hallway to my waiting group, I don't have time to think about it. However, now that I think back to that class and what I learned, it seems so relatable. I watched Jenny walk through the door and watched the men stop and turn to see a beautiful, radiant, well-dressed woman gliding through the crowd. My stomach churned at the thought that things could go wrong again. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek. With a serious expression on her face, she asked us to move to a booth in the corner. When we sat down, the waitress asked if we wanted anything. I offered to buy her a drink, but she only asked for water. I took the opportunity to order myself a second long sleeve, feeling the need for something to help dull my feelings. After letting the waitress move farther away, Jenny spoke up. John, I'm sorry I've been acting weird lately. Something has happened that will change our relationship. I was too flustered to listen to her, so I interrupted. Look, I know what's going on. I heard you and Nicole talking. She threw me a surprised look. She seemed disappointed. I don't know what caused this, I continued, but I'm not going to put up with it. If you think you're going to make me change things with threats, you're wrong. I love you, but I'm not going to become a doormat. Really? Jenny looked at me with something that almost resembled laughter. I couldn't understand how she could think there was anything funny about this situation. Jenny scolded me. So you were eavesdropping? What happened to the rule about us discussing everything and never going to bed angry? She must have seen how upset I was, and suddenly her expression softened. After all, I can't have the father of my child not trusting me. I was stunned for a second, thinking I thought she had just said that. You said... Jenny couldn't hide her smile any longer. Yes, silly. You're going to be a father again. I'm pregnant. I didn't have time to think about anything but relief that I was so wrong about tonight. I leaned across the table and grabbed her face to kiss her. The pose was awkward, and I realized I was pulling her into the table. I quickly stood up and pulled her out of the booth to hug her, while I tried to realize the incredible change of events. We hugged each other for a long time without saying anything. Finally, I gathered the strength to speak. When did you find out? Jen raised her hand to touch my cheek, as she did so often. I always wondered if it was her favorite gesture because she liked it, or because she knew I liked it. Just today. The doctor said he's pretty sure it happened the day you surprised me with the adoption papers. The way you made love to me, I will never forget. I'm so glad our baby was created that way. I didn't know what else to say. So many things were running through my head that it felt like my body just shut down. Finally, I was able to gather my thoughts. It occurred to me that, unlike my experience with Danielle's mother, I was excited from the second she told me. I couldn't believe how different it was from how I had felt before when Katie had told me the same thing. However, I wasn't ready to let her off the hook just yet. I can't believe you did that to me. You scared the hell out of me. She smiled. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. Why didn't you just ask me what was going on? I was so embarrassed. I must have looked like a complete idiot. Everything happened so fast I didn't have time to think. What the hell did you talk about yesterday? You said you weren't going to let me run your life anymore. No, I said I wouldn't let him run my life. My boss. He was upset because I had already taken so much time off work in the last few months. He warned me that he would have to let me go if anything else happened. Well, I'd say it's a pretty big deal, and I'm not going to drag myself to work in poor health just to make him happy. Haven't you noticed how sick I've been the last couple weeks? By this time, I realized there was no hiding from me how much I had misjudged everything. Yeah, but I thought it was because you've been avoiding me. Jenny couldn't suppress a laugh. You thought I'd make myself sick to avoid you? She seemed to notice how uncomfortable I was and finally stopped picking on me. I thought something was wrong, so I took a pregnancy test. It came back positive, but I wanted to consult a doctor before telling you. I thought I would go crazy if I waited until today to find out, so I decided to tell Nicole. I was just talking to her about it when you apparently decided to play detective. I probably should have told you first, but I just wanted to make sure. You've had enough bad surprises from me. I wanted to give you a good one. Will you forgive me? Now it was my turn to smile. Well, now I wake up every morning thinking I have to forgive you for something anyway, so I'll just add it to the list. She tried to look indignant but failed miserably, slapping my arm. Just remember our list of rules, mister. When I get fat and cranky, I expect you to take proper care of me. With pleasure, my lady, I said with a mocking bow. A voice was heard over my shoulder. Can we join the party now? Turning around, I was surprised to see Steve and Sharon. Pushing Steve aside, Sharon enclosed me in a crushing hug. I didn't realize she was so strong. She kissed my cheek and said, I'm so happy for you two. Steve waited, looking impatient. When she moved on to Jenny, he shook my hand and even gave me a quick hug. In case you were wondering, Jenny invited us. I turned again to my wife, who looked unexpectedly glum. I called them after I talked to you. I didn't think you'd mind, and I wanted them to be able to share it with us. If it hadn't been for their help, I don't know if you would have given me another chance. I realized how acutely she was feeling about her act and how close we were to not reconciling. I didn't want anything to ruin that mood, so I put my arm around her shoulders reassuringly. She smiled again. Steve told me how he had to threaten to kick your ass to get you to call Brian. I grinned, remembering my reluctance to face the truth when this all started. That's right, Steve glowered. I take full credit for getting you two straightened out. As a reward for my infinite patience and foresight, I am to be godfather to my namesake. Your namesake? I laughed heartily. I'm sorry, but under no circumstances will I call my child an asshole. I had to dodge quickly to avoid the punch. About an hour later, we finally said goodnight to our two friends. Jenny led me to the room she had booked earlier. Despite her enthusiasm, Jenny still looked worried. John, please tell me this is what you want. I know we still have a long way to go to make things right between us, but I'm so excited about this. It's very important to me that you are happy too. I didn't hesitate. That's incredible news. I wish we didn't have any other problems, but I'm very happy. I can't wait until we tell Danny she's going to be a big sister. She will be beyond excited. Now, these memories help me appreciate how blessed I truly am. Jenny had a flawless pregnancy, for which I am so grateful. I enjoyed every moment I spent with her. Things were so different with Katie, and I was grateful for another chance to experience it right. Danny was a treasure. She read to Jenny often, making sure to kiss her tummy so that the baby, when born, would know how much she loved him. Pushing the memories out of my mind, I walked through the doors into the waiting area and saw our friends and all of Jenny's family eagerly waiting. I was torn between wanting to be a smartass and wanting to scream with joy. Eventually, I settled on a quiet cheer. It's a boy. I forced myself to say it without shouting. When the celebration subsided a bit, I was finally able to savor the moment I had been looking forward to for months. Danny, do you want to go meet your little brother? The end. If you haven't watched the first part of this video, the link will be in the description. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.